The Central Intelligence
¿Qué
Agency
tal?
and the
Dijera entonces
Monroe
que aquí les dejo un
Institute
video
have
documental
done a
de
multitude of studies
Nazi
together on remote
CIA
viewing. Do you
Project
want to go into a
Remote
little bit more about the
Viewing.
Monroe
Chequen
Institute?
el
I
video
think it's
justamente
the
el Big
most
Boss, el fantasma
premier
verde que soy
research
yo, the
center
one and
for
only
consciousness
en todo el
expansion.
universo.
It's a place where, like you
Bonita
said,
tarde
the
para
history behind
todos.
it was they sent the early remote viewers for the CIA and other military intelligence to that location to be able to utilize technology that assisted them in making better target viewings. Joe McMoneagle, who's a teacher at the remote viewing program at Monroe Institute and who has just a storied existence of successes in remote viewing for the military and special operations forces. They gave him the Legion of Merit regarding his ability to sit in his house in Virginia and tell you what's going on inside a Russian facility underground somewhere in the tundra of northern Russia.
I was at Fort Meade working as a Mideast analyst. What I didn't know is I lived next door to the operations officer and training officer for the remote viewing unit. They invited me over to their offices and sat me down and said, well, what we do here is collect intelligence against foreign threats using a parapsychology discipline called remote viewing. We essentially want to invite you to become a psychic spy. The U.S. intelligence community had been following what the Russians were up to and the Soviets and discovered they were pursuing parapsychology pursuits. And so the CIA was obligated to check this out. And at a certain point, they were having such good success that the CIA said, we ought to be using it against the Russians, you know. And at that point, then it went operational and they started collecting intelligence against the Russians using remote viewing and the Chinese and a bunch of other people. A viewer who is well-trained and has a lot of experience, produces information that is clearly remote viewing in origin, you know, it's clearly psychic, if you will, in origin, roughly 70% of the time.
Because of the Soviet aggression, I have asked the United States Senate to defer further consideration of the SALT II treaty.
In the 70s, when Jimmy Carter was president, they were trying to figure out how to base these missiles so that the Soviets couldn't take out our missile systems. So they built this racetrack plant, kind of a shell game deal, where you had a bunch of these shelters out in the desert, and you shuttle the missile randomly between the shelters, and that would make it practically impossible for the Soviets to actually hit that missile. The problem was we had to find out if there was a way that the Soviets could beat the system. And so the SRI, Stanford Research Institute folks, did a study, and they were able to identify 100% of the time where the missile would be. And that information was provided to Carter, and Carter canceled the basing plan because it became obvious that there was a way of beating it.
I've directed that no high technology or other strategic items will be licensed for sale to the Soviet Union until further notice.
It did affect policy. It did affect a high-level government decision. And there is actually a letter from John Warner that confirms this.